Hi, good evening, everyone. So Tom and I wanted to start by just doing a little kind of skit for you about some work that we're doing here in California and how that actually got started.
So, want to intro yourself a little more?
Sure. Oh, okay, yes, I think that's a good idea.
All right.
I'm Sandra Henriquez, the Executive Director of the California Coalition Against Sexual Assault, and my organization represents 84 rape crisis center programs that serve victims in every geographic location of California. The programs also do a lot in terms of trying to prevent sexual violence to begin with, so that's what I do, and that's how I came to know people from ATSA and Tom.
So, I'm Tom Tobin. I'm a California psychologist up in Northern California. I work with an agency that works with adult sex offenders, trying to help them so that they never reoffend. And I want to thank whoever asked that last question, and I want to thank the responders, because that's kind of exactly what happened. So as Sandra said, we want to play just a little bit with you. These are not the exact facts. This is the super condensed version, but this is kind of what happened.
Oh, hello.
Yes, hello. I've never met you. My name is Tom Tobin, and I know that you are the executive director of CalCASA. I'm with an organization called the California Coalition on Sexual Offending, and we work with sex offenders, and I know sometimes people who do your kind of work don't like to talk to people who do my kind of work, but I really thought it would be a good idea for us to talk and connect and see if there's some possibility of collaborating in some way.
Tom, thanks for reaching out to me, and since you called me, I imagine that you understand the kind of work that I do and the work that CalCASA does, and that we represent the rape crisis center programs that basically serve victims around the state of California. And so just to be honest with you, some of the people that I work with don't generally have an interest in working with people that work with offenders. So, it's interesting that you should call. I do think, though, that just in terms of some of the work that maybe that you're doing, it seems that you are working to also prevent future sexual violence, which is definitely something that we're interested in. We're obviously interested in preventing sexual violence altogether, but certainly preventing any kind of reoffense. So I think it's interesting that you called, and definitely think that we should get together and talk, and maybe you have, since you called me, maybe you have some ideas about what that might look like and how we could work together.
Wow, I'm really glad to feel welcomed by you. I know it's a kind of a tough relationship, but yeah, actually, I do have an idea. And that is something that's been done in some other states, which is, there's so many different people and agencies and organizations and branches of government that have something to do with sexual offending and with responding to sexual offending. And what some of these other states have done is create what they call a sex offender management board. And I thought, well, maybe we could collaborate and see if we could get something like that to happen in California. I know those other boards have victim representatives who play a major role.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like an interesting idea, and I think maybe one that we can talk about more and consider, and maybe even think about other kinds of people that would, I don't know that much about it. I'm sure you since you know what these other states are doing, but maybe even look at ensuring that some of the courts, like the courts in California, are involved, and county administrators. And Tom, interestingly, CalCASA is about to develop a new strategic plan. So we're in the process of doing that, and this, I think if we talk more and kind of explore this might be something, a particular project that we may be interested in including in that plan, and maybe something that we can work on in terms of going forward.
Wow, that would be great. So let's connect later and see if we can make something happen.
Great.
Thanks.
Okay, sure.
Bye.
Okay. So now I'm calling Tom follow-up phone call.
Ring. Hello.
Hi, Tom. It's Sandra Henriquez with CalCasa.
Hi.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good.
Good. Remember when we were talking last and I mentioned that we were going to put this idea about a sex offender management board into our strategic plan?
Yeah, I
So
do.
we actually did that. We did
great.
that, and Assemblywoman Judy Chu from the California legislature was reviewing our strategic plan, and she really wanted to do something and introduce some legislation on our behalf, and this was actually something she was interested in. So I'm wondering if we can get together and talk and maybe come up with some language that we can give her so that she can help introduce some legislation on our behalf.
Wow, that is really exciting. Yeah, I'd love to do it. Let's set a time and let's try to make this happen. Oh, I'm just bowled over. This is great news. Talk to you later.
Okay. Fast forward, third phone call. About, I don't know how many months later, but third phone call. Hi, Tom.
Yeah, hi, Sandra.
Hi. Are you sitting down?
No, but I'll hold on.
Well, you might want to sit down. You might want to
Okay.
sit down. Okay, I have good news for you, Tom. Well, the bill that we've been working on actually passed through the legislature unanimously.
Oh,
And it was signed into law by the governor.
that is
Yeah.
such fantastic news. Wow. Well, I guess it's going to be more than a collaboration to make it happen. It's going to be a collaboration to put it into reality. So let's get going.
So yeah, we have a lot of work to do now. So why don't we get together and talk, and so that we can look at what this partnership continues to look like, and look at who else needs to be at the table. I think it's a huge step in California in terms of advancing sex offender management and ensuring that the communities are safer, and that we work and do what we can together to try and prevent repeat offenses by identified offenders.
You said it. Prevent repeat offenses by identified offenders. Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Thanks. Bye.
Okay.
So, not the total truth, but the condensed version. This is what happened. So, actually, this afternoon, the California Sex Offender Management Board met in this very hotel. Are any members here tonight? 1, 2, 3, 4, a few back there. Okay, that's great. So, working with CalCasa, this actually came to pass. And the board's been meeting now for, I think, 8 years maybe, and I think we've accomplished a fair amount. The goal has been collaboration among all those different groups. There's a handout back there, or you can go on the board's website if you're a Californian interested in this. Collaboration to prevent future sexual abuse by identified sex offenders. Now, if you've been listening carefully tonight, you'll realize this is just a small part of the big pie, because identified sex offenders are not the big problem. Myth dispelled. The big problem is the culture that creates and perpetuates the possibilities of sexual abuse. But our task, the Sex Offender Management Board, is what can we do to stop known offenders from reoffending? Well, we look around, we see various things that California has decided to do. The principle that drives the board and drives what the board tries to accomplish is, let's look at the evidence, let's look at the research, let's not just do what our guts say will make us feel better. So there are some things that have been tried, and there's some, if you will, weapons we can use. And here's one of them. This should take care of some sex offenders, I think, if we do it just right. This is sex offender registration. And sex offender registration will definitely prevent sex offenders from reoffending. Right? Wrong. There's some value in it, but it does not prevent reoffending. And the research now is pretty clear. It tells us that. Well, so we'll save a little bit of it. What about what often goes with that? Community notification. If people know who the sex offenders are that live in their neighborhood and can find out easily, that will prevent future sexual offending, right? You know where it's going. Wrong. It's just not true, and the research supports, you've heard it already tonight, the research says it's not true. Notification doesn't prevent future sexual offending. Okay, oh, well, listen. If we just keep these sex offenders away from places where, especially where children are, so let's put in residence restrictions so that they can't live near schools, near parks, near places where children gather. That'll stop it, right? Residence restrictions. Let's put it on a ballot and have the people of California pass it by 70% margin. That'll solve the problem, right? Or at least it will prevent some sexual reoffending. Here we go. Absolutely wrong. Not only that, we're not even saving a part of this because the research suggests that it makes things worse. You saw, sex offenders, to be safe, need to be stable, need to have a life worth living. That does just the opposite. Well, what else could we do? We'll keep them away from where children gather during the day. We'll set up exclusion zones, a very hot topic in California right now, and it's going to get hotter next year. So, is there evidence that says exclusion zones prevent sexual offenders from reoffending? There is not. Well, what about monitoring them? Put those ankle bracelets on, we'll know where they are at every moment. Is there any evidence, including the statements by the people that sell these devices, that says this will prevent future sexual offending? There is not. Back up. Okay, so, well, maybe we just lock them up forever, throw away the key, send them to prison, send them to a civil commitment program. Well, yeah, that actually might stop them, but as you already heard, I think we can't afford that. It's a ridiculous waste of money, especially since we know that 5% of the new sexual offenses are not committed by these identified sexual offenders. So should we have prison? Should we have jail? Do some of them need to be incarcerated to protect the community? Absolutely. We will keep some of that, but to think of it as the big solution, forget it. It's ridiculous. All right. Then we've got supervision. If we really intensely supervise these people, parole agents, probation officers, watch them night and day, will that stop them from future sexual offending? The research says no, it won't all by itself. It just doesn't. But wait, we do know more. We do know that when you combine good, intensive supervision and communication and collaboration with a good, solid, evidence-based treatment program, things start to happen. And then we'll add one more that has, I'll admit it, shaky research base, but it's frequently used and it seems to work in a lot of places, and that is, some people would say it's surveillance. It's keeping an eye on them by other people, by their families, by their boss, by other people in the community, by law enforcement. But then one big part of this is the polygraph. Giving them lie detector tests to find out, are they behaving, are they following the rules, are they doing what they need to do, are they staying away from high-risk situations. So now what we have created is a triangle. That's these different agencies and individuals who have specialties, different, but who communicate with each other all the time. The offender is in the middle. And that's what seems to make a difference in terms of stopping reoffending. Treatment alone, without supervision and forcing them into treatment, it won't work. Nobody will show up, or very few. But once they're in treatment, you'd be surprised how many of them say, you know, I thought I hated this, but it's actually a big help to me. So this is what the California Sex Offender Management Board has proposed and recommended repeatedly to the policymakers of the state of California, and the policymakers have adopted it. So we are now in the process of rolling out the containment model in California. There are 6,000 parolees who now have treatment with contracted providers, have supervision with increasingly well-trained parole agents, and who are required to have a polygraph as a part of that. It's state law, it's happening, it's gonna happen. Probation is happening, but a little slower for many, many reasons. But we think we're on the right track. We think that in terms of this little piece of the pie, managing sex offenders who have previously offended and stopping them from reoffending, we think we're doing the right thing. So, thank you.
Now I feel bad because I don't have all those good props that Tom had. Anyway, we gave you a little intro in terms of the way that our Sex Offender Management Board came to be here in California, part of the way. And so I want to go back and acknowledge a couple of the executive directors that came before me. And first was Mary Beth Carter, who really was the visionary that actually made sure that that got into the strategic plan. And then after her, after she left, Suzanne Brown McBride really picked up the work and kept doing that and advancing the work in terms of that. So when I started as the executive director of CalCASA in November of 2010, and I got the phone call from the governor's office about the appointment, you know, my first reaction was certainly of surprise because I'd spent 20 plus years of my career working for and on behalf of sexual assault victims. So it was quite a surprise. However, you know, one of the things that we do in the movement in the field working to help and prevent sexual violence is that we look at all of the systems. We look at what are the systems that we have to interface with to improve things. What are those systems? Are they, you know, obviously criminal justice, campuses, detention and jails and prisons and all of those kinds of things. And so part of the work is to, in terms of advancing it, is to interface with those systems and to see how we can improve them. So I had a huge learning curve ahead of me when I joined the board. But one of the things that I learned, and because I've worked for so many years with sexual assault survivors, is that, you know, obviously we know that most survivors are assaulted by somebody that they know, right? And the other thing that I had heard and learned many years in terms of working with victims is that a lot of times, particularly if it's somebody in the family, it's somebody that they love and that they want to continue to have a relationship with. What they don't want is the behavior. What they don't want is the sexual behavior of a sexual nature, but they do want to continue to have a relationship with them. And one of the things that I began to put together from working with and on behalf of survivors, and then learning what I was learning in terms of working with the Sex Offender Management Board, was that, you know, a lot of our policies and approaches are sometimes contributing to a climate where the family members and even the survivors are ending up feeling like they have to lie and hide and sneak around because they want to still protect this individual. So when the offender comes out of prison, there's somewhere that they need to go, and oftentimes it's their families that want to take them back. So one of the things I began to look at and really think about was really in terms of our work around preventing reoffense. And that prevention was the place where we could connect and intersect with the sex offender management people. And so, you know, I really began thinking about, in terms of a lot of the survivors that we worked with and the survivors that the programs that I represent work with, was really if we could have conversations, and, you know, because one of the things that allows sexual violence to continue is the secretiveness, the fact that it's a secret. But if we could, you know, normalize the discussion around the reality and who does it and why it happens and those kinds of things, and we could effectively educate the families and the communities around the risk factors and what happens when those risks go up and the things to be looking out for. So when Uncle Johnny loses his job, or when Uncle Johnny can't get a job, or when, these kinds of things, or when Uncle Johnny can't go to the park with us, and, all of these kinds of things. Those are things that, I've learned that help to increase the risk factors. And so if we could talk about those and identify those within the families and within the communities, and everybody could say, hey, Uncle Johnny, we know it's not a secret. And, everybody's keeping an eye. We still love you, but everybody's keeping an eye on this situation. And and that people really could know, couldn't we then help to prevent this from happening in the future by eliminating, the secrets, by eliminating the shame of this having happened within the home or within the family. The other place that I really, thought about was also in terms of the policies, and that's also something that I, learned in terms of being involved with the Sex Offender Management Board, is really that so many of the policies that we're putting into place do come from a reactionary place and a place of fear, and probably things that years ago I would have absolutely supported, but because I've learned that so many of the policies that we have in place are actually increasing the risk, and that they're not really helpful. Tom just did his visual there about that. Then, I think that this is an area where we can work together. And it's, it's difficult because people look, I know the first time I went to a COSO conference, I don't know if I've ever said this to anybody but on the board, but the first time I went to a COSO conference and I called somebody about, I'm at this conference, what they said to me, and this was somebody that worked on the victim advocate side, what they said to me is, you're not flipping over to the other side, are you? I mean, and it was kind of a shock to me, but it demonstrated to me the amount of work that really needs to happen. And so I think the charge ahead of, those of us who work and provide leadership in terms of victim advocacy is really to try and figure out where those connections are and to create those bridges. Because, as Tom mentioned, we're working now with the containment model here in California, and we have a lot of work to do. And part of that work really involves getting victim advocates invested and understanding why we should be working together and how, that it's critical to have their voices at the table, informing policies, informing victim-centered approaches that take into consideration, the victims, and that it's just critical that our voices are there as these policies are being made, as the prevention approaches and efforts are underway. So that's really what I wanted to share, and just that we have a lot of work to do, but I know that at CalCASA we're up for the charge, and we're definitely looking to work more closely with ATSA and make sure that that happens here in California. Thank you.